So first I'd like to talk about the first two main problems associated with the energy crisis in the United States. The first, of course, is economic viability, the economic cost and profitability, and the second is supply problems. By diversifying the energy through the utilization of alternative energy resources, we'll allow for the United States to solve for both of these problems, both by profiting economically, as well as having a steady supply of energy that is continually available to every citizen within the United States, as well as a safe thing for the United States to use. So the way we do this starts out with the creation of more domestic sources of energy. Alternative energy sources exist within the United States already and merely need an infusion of added infrastructure to create viable sources of energy for consumption on the part of Americans. Nuclear, wind, solar, and hydroelectric power all constitute viable alternative energy sources that the United States could utilize in addition to the ethanol and clean coal production already under development at the federal level, and that all of these combined could create possibly at least the semblance of a greener America. Additionally, there are economic benefits to the creation of our domestic energy industry, not the least of which is the creation of millions of jobs in the United States for the development of necessary infrastructure and technology for the changeover from oil. The short-term costs would exist, but they would be marginal. And you must, of course, compare this to the long-term benefits of a largely domestic energy industry within the United States. But there are other benefits additionally to having these diverse energy resources used by the U.S. And I will, of course, quote former President Bush in his 2006 State of the Union address when he talked about how we are addicted to foreign oil. How do we change this? The use of alternative energy sources within the United States to create domestically produced energy is a way to cut ties with a nation such as Saudi Arabia that we feel are security threats to the United States while keeping America's energy safe and cheap. So while China and India increase their oil consumption, prices will only elevate. Thus, alternative energy sources are the only way to keep a price of energy constant. Disruptions in oil flow will exist, such as after Hurricane Katrina, causing unstable spikes in oil prices. But by creating multiple sources of energy, each of which could supplement the existing energy trade from our allies, such as Canada, we would be able to create a steady supply of energy at a stable cost to Americans, increasing employment inside of Americans, inside of the United States, as well as creating long-term economic and social benefit at a very marginal cost to the United States.
Just think of the single mom working 2 jobs, struggling to pay her mortgage, struggling to send her kids to school, overwhelmed and burdened with high energy costs for electric, heating, oil, water, and her car. Think about what we can do to alleviate her suffering. It's really quite simple. It's elementary economics. When you increase the supply of energy in the marketplace, you decrease the cost. Now, this is the guiding principle for why Republicans, not Democrats, despite what the previous speaker just told you, endorse an all-of-the-above approach to energy. Wind, solar, nuclear, biodiesel, hydroelectric, clean coal, offshore drilling. We believe in tapping into every available resource at our disposal. We want to put the great minds of this country to work, the industrialists and the entrepreneurs and the scientists and the researchers. We want them to tell us what the best sources of energy are. We don't want some politician in Washington who doesn't have a PhD in chemistry or environmental science telling us what the best source of energy is. Some will say that nuclear energy isn't safe. Well, this is a bold-faced lie. France runs 80% of its country on nuclear power. If there were ever a time to take a play out of the French playbook, this would be the time. And they have never had a major nuclear incident ever. The United States hasn't had a major nuclear incident since the 1970s, 3 Mile Island. So this notion that nuclear energy isn't safe is a very big misconception. Then you want to talk about offshore drilling. Some say even if we started drilling tomorrow, we wouldn't reduce the cost. This is another bold-faced lie. The day the federal government lifts the ban on offshore drilling, not what the previous speaker's talking about utilizing what's already available, but lifting the ban on offshore drilling, you will see a precipitous decline in the futures market for oil, which will dramatically decrease the price that the average consumer pays at the pump.
So when we talk about the offshore drilling, the other things that the private market is trying to increase, he's talking about offshore drilling, the short-term interests of the United States. So absolutely, in the short term, I'm not saying that creating more oil is not going to create more oil. That's obvious. But we're trying to cut our use of oil altogether. We're trying to create a more domestic energy market, or at least an alternative energy market, where you don't have to drill for this oil. How do you create this? It is through short-term investments on the part of the United States government. So he's saying that the United States government should somehow not be involved at all with the entirety of the energy policy of the United States. I tend to disagree with this.
First, let's examine the role that the U.S. government has played in investing, aka spending, in the field of energy. You look at ethanol subsidies. Do you remember them? Do you remember when the government used to subsidize ethanol? It seemed like such a short time ago, but we don't tend to do that anymore. Why? Because it didn't work. Because the government tried to subsidize ethanol, and ethanol went bust. It was a failure. So we see that the government's tried to get involved. The government has tried to dictate what the forces of the market, what the great minds that I was talking about, the great industrials and the entrepreneurs already knew that ethanol wouldn't work. But the government said, no, we know better. We don't have the PhD in chemistry, but we know better. Ethanol's going to work. I understand oil is only a short-term solution, but why not tap into the resources that we have on the OCS, off the coast of California and off the Atlantic coast and in the Gulf of Mexico. 85% of the outer continental shelf is not being utilized by us. Think of how much supply that would create in the marketplace, and think about how much that would drive down the costs for the average consumer. Make no mistake about this. His thinly veiled disguise of supporting energy independence and supporting alternative fuels is really all what it is. It's a thinly veiled disguise. Ask any Democrat. Ask Barack Obama does not support nuclear power. The Democratic Party does not support nuclear power. So he seems to be making his case for me that he says he supports nuclear power. They say, well, listen, reducing emissions comes first. Helping the average American comes second. That is their priority, to reduce emissions at any cost. And you see the ramifications of this where they don't support drilling in Anwar, they don't support drilling off of the OCS, they don't support nuclear power, they don't support clean coal. You see all these types of energies that have been proven to be efficient and that we can utilize, we're not utilizing because the Democrats don't want to, because they're more concerned about the caribou than the hardworking American.
So we've done some analysis as to that the private enterprise should be the only people concerned with the energy inside of America. Energy is a really big thing. This is why a government exists, to deal with really big things. So with this really big thing, we have to see the security benefits, something he absolutely agrees with. We create a domestic alternative energy resource, something also my opponent completely agrees with. And then he says that additionally, we should for some reason also drill in oil reserves that we have no reason to drill in apart from these short-term benefits. This is where the role of the government comes in. This is the foresight I was talking about. The government's role is to facilitate positive change in the long term. That is what I'm talking about. Not the short-term oil drilling, not the short-term benefits, but the long-term subsidies, not just ethanol, but in fact shale oil, development of technology, creation of millions of jobs for the Americans that have recently lost them. This is where the role of the government comes in.
How do you plan on diversifying your energy resources when the Democratic Party doesn't support nuclear power, doesn't support clean coal, doesn't support drilling off the coasts? How does he plan to create jobs when the Democratic Party supports a cap-and-trade system that would destroy jobs by putting undue regulations and burdens on companies, forcing them to make environmental adaptations too rapidly? That is what destroys jobs. You want to know what creates jobs? By allowing private companies to drill off the coast, by allowing them to invest private money into nuclear power, into clean coal, into all these different types of technologies, and all of the above approach. That's how you create jobs. You get more nuclear power plants running. You get more clean coal facilities. You get more offshore drilling. You get everything. It increases jobs. I don't understand how limiting investment can increase jobs, maybe government jobs, because you need bureaucrats to say where you can and can't drill, but these aren't real jobs that create any wealth. in this country. These are real jobs that are going to get us out of this recession. So I appeal to you. If you want to support the party that cares more about the family of Caribou than the family of hardworking Americans, then support them. But if you care about getting us out of this recession with great minds and the entrepreneurial spirit that made this country great and the innovation to do better and to reach higher, then support our position. Thank you.